Hi, it's Summer, and today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in April. The first book that I read in April is actually a poetry collection. I'm in my poetry era. This collection is called With My Back to the World by Victoria Chang. I read this as a NetGalley arc. I don't really like to rate nonfiction or poetry unless it's going to be 5 stars because it's usually like so personal to the author and it's real life, not just like fiction. But lately I've been kind of debating on whether or not I want to like start giving it a star rating, because when I'm reading poetry or nonfiction, I'm obviously not basing my star rating on the person's experience. My rating is based off of like my enjoyment of like the writing or the different like poetry techniques. In future reviews, I might start giving star ratings for nonfiction. You'll have to let me know how you feel about that in the comments. If you feel like having a star rating helps you decide if you want to read it or not. With My Back to the World is a collection of poetry that's inspired by the art of Agnes Martin. It explores topics of feminism, art, depression, and grief. I don't know how the finished copy looks, but my NetGalley arc didn't have any like images or anything included of the artwork that each of the poems were based off of, but the title of each poem is the title of a painting by Agnes Martin, and so it was really easy to like go on Google and like research the painting. I thought that was a really fun part of this collection, was seeing how the author described the painting in a really beautiful poetic way, and then afterwards like looking at the painting itself to see like a literal image of it rather than just what my mind could conjure up. For this one, I said I really enjoyed and flew through the first half of this collection, but the last 50% felt very repetitive and dense. There were a few poems and lines that I really enjoyed, but for a lot of this one, I didn't understand what the poems were saying, which doesn't mean that it's not good poetry, just that that's why it's not a perfect collection for me personally. I did really appreciate the themes in this one, and I enjoyed how this collection was based off of different artwork and how each piece of art was described. My favorite poems from this collection were Untitled Number 3, 1994, Summer 1964, Buds 1959, and Falling Blue 1963. And then I thought I would read you a couple of my favorite quotes from this collection so you can kind of see if you like the writing style or if you'd like to pick this collection up. In this room, I am trying to paint in lowercase. I'm trying to draw a woman's heartbeat, not the heart. And that one's from Aspiration 1960. Depression is a group of parallel lines that want to touch but never can, from Untitled 1961. How even happiness is made by writing something down, then leaving it exposed for all to see. Is it possible to be seen but not looked at? From The Island 1961. Is it possible to feel happiness while on the line? Or is the present just the pointed tip of death's sword? From Drift of Summer 1964. Once I write the word depression, it is no longer my feeling. It's now on view for others to walk toward, lean in, and peer at. From Play 1966. There were a lot of poems and lines that I really liked from this collection, but overall it's not like a favorite collection of mine, but I can tell from how good the writing itself is and the way that the author writes about their experiences, I think other people will really relate to this collection and really enjoy it. So even though it's not a favorite of mine, I still highly recommend that you give it a try if you're a fan of poetry. After that, I read Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. I actually got to listen to this one on audio a week or two before its actual release date because of Libro FM. They have a program where you can become an advanced listener of audiobooks on there, and they have a lot of really great selections every month. So that's how I read this one. I gave this one 4 stars, and I would really like to own this one physically, especially because there's a really cool edition of it that I think is from Barnes & Noble, and it's packaged to look like an actual VCR tape, and I think that's the coolest thing ever. This was a really quick, fun read. I read it in a day, and I'm so glad that I liked this one because I read 2 other books from this author, and they weren't my favorite. They were just like okay, so I was so excited to like really enjoy a book of theirs. This one follows 3 estranged siblings after they have to return home to take care of their mom's estate after she passes away. Also, several years before her passing, their dad just like left them. So they have a lot of trauma and a lot of things that they have to kind of work through. But while they're taking care of the house and going through their parents' belongings, they find a box of VHS tapes. They decide to watch some of them just to be nostalgic and just like watch some family videos. They are really surprised though when one of the tapes turns out to be a video of their dad covered in blood and both of their parents disposing of a body. So now they have to decide if they're just going to leave that in the past or if they're going to try to figure out what actually happened. For this one, I said I had so much fun listening to this one. I really liked the audio narrators, so I definitely recommend listening to this one. I had a lot of fun trying to figure out who was behind everything, and I really liked the sibling dynamic. It reminded me a lot of the siblings from The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. The ending was satisfying, and I loved how the title fit into the story. I did kind of forget to say about like The Haunting of Hill House parallels. I really loved the sibling dynamic in The Haunting of Hill House because none of the siblings are perfect people, and it was interesting to see them have to work together and learning about each of their backstories. One of the siblings in The Haunting of Hill House also struggles with a drug addiction, and so does one of the siblings in Home is Where the Bodies Are. So I found a lot of similarities kind of between those things, but I thought this one was really good. I had a fun time with it, and I definitely recommend it. After that, I read Don't Want You Like a Best Friend by Emma R. Albin. This cover is so cute. It's a sapphic Regency romance, and it's friends to lovers. Oh my gosh, it was so cute. I gave this one 4 stars. This one is about 2 female best friends who are trying to get their parents to have a second chance romance. If I'm remembering right, they dated when they were younger, but didn't end up together. So while these 2 are scheming to try to get their parents together, they end up kind of forming feelings for each other. For this one, I said the Bridgerton vibes were 10 out of 10, and I loved the female-female romance. So cute, and I loved the friends to lovers trope. It felt like it was a little too long and could have been wrapped up quicker, but I loved the ending and what it set up for the sequel. After that, I read Murder Road by Simone St. James. I read this for my friend Jessie's book club, Sleep When I'm Dead. I was one of the co-hosts for this month, so there's a whole entire discussion on Jessie's channel of me, her, and our friend Zoe all talking about this book. I'll put it in the description so that you can go check it out if you want to. Spoiler for that discussion, I gave this 2 stars. It wasn't my favorite. It's about this newly married couple that are driving down this like kind of creepy back road to their honeymoon. They see this figure on the side of the road, and as they get closer, they see that it's a young girl who's like walking really weird and like looks like she's not doing okay. She's been attacked and she has a really bad injury, so they're taking her to the hospital. And when they get to the hospital, they become suspects in her murder. So they have to stay in this small town to be like interviewed by the police. They also find out while they're there that this is not the first murder that's happened on this road. So while they're in the middle of this investigation, they're also kind of trying to get to the bottom of it themselves. I guess that this author kind of specializes in paranormal thrillers. So I was really excited to read this one because I love paranormal aspects in thrillers, but unfortunately this one just didn't really work for me. Not necessarily because of the paranormal aspect, just because of like other things that were happening in the book. I said this was enjoyable enough to keep my attention while doing work around the house, but if I didn't have the audiobook, I don't know if I would have finished this one. I loved the premise and that the action started up pretty quickly, but it just ended up being lackluster. I'm still confused about people's motives and why certain things were happening on this road. Everything just felt disjointed, and there wasn't strong enough common sense or reasoning behind people's actions. The only character that I liked was Rose. Pretty much everyone else was unbelievable and felt like caricatures. It was predictable, and the ending left so much to be desired. We also got multiple monologues towards the end that I really didn't care for. It was also set during the 90s, but could have been set in any time or decade and been exactly the same. I was hoping for more nostalgia. I would still try more from this author in the future though, because I enjoyed the writing itself and the paranormal aspects of the story. I also really enjoyed the audiobook. After that, I decided to reread The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I first read this back in 2018 when it first came out, and I think that I was expecting like ACOTAR from it or something, and I remember not really liking it, and I decided that I didn't want to continue in the series. But I've always been kind of curious about how this series goes, and I also keep seeing all of this amazing fan art of Jude and Cardan, and I finally was like, okay, I just need to like read this series. So I reread the first book just so that I could actually remember where the story was going, since it's been years since I've been in this world. If you don't know, this is about Jude. It says she was 7 years old when her parents were murdered, and she and her 2 sisters were stolen away to live in the treacherous high court of Fairy. Jude and her twin sister are humans living in Fairy, and they have a half-sister who's half fae, half human. Being a human in Fairy is really dangerous. There's a lot of like bad magic and kind of tricks that you can kind of fall into. Also, the fae and fairies just aren't very nice to them, especially Prince Cardan, who him and his friend group like really bully and torment these sisters. There's a lot of like fairy politics and action and fighting, spying and secrets and stuff that go on in this one. It's YA, and it definitely feels like YA, especially with how the audiobook narrator talks for these characters. I didn't write a review back in 2018 when I first read this, and I'm kind of sad that I didn't, because I would have liked to know specifically like what things I liked and didn't like. I think I gave it 3 stars the first time around, and this time I'm giving it like closer to a 3.5. Also, my cat is crunching on some food in the background, so we have some ASMR. For this one, I said I liked this more than my first time reading. I had forgotten most of the plot, so it felt like I was reading it for the first time. The audiobook definitely read younger, so I had a hard time with that, but I love Jude and Carden. I also loved the setting and all of the descriptions of things, especially clothing. Like reading about like their dresses and stuff and how they were described. I loved all of that. The ending was also fun and kind of twisty. It was just a fun little romantasy to revisit. I did also read the sequel a couple books after that, so I'll tell you my thoughts on the sequel in a second. Right after that though, I read Instructions for Traveling West. It's a collection of poems by Joy Sullivan. I read this one as an ARC from NetGalley. The description says, a vivid and inspiring poetry collection about what's possible when we heed our instincts and honor our intuition, allowing ourselves to strike out for new territories of love, pleasure, and peace. For this one, I said I really enjoyed this collection. It was nostalgic and I liked the themes that it explored. There were a few poems that mentioned animal death and violence that I tried to skip, so definitely be aware of that if you're sensitive to it. My favorite poems were Howl, the cashier at the gas station asks where I'm from, Eve's apology, my mother says kissing a man without a mustache is like eating eggs without salt, after COVID, and comment section. I also loved this quote from the poem, In This New Life. I've finally found a way to live on the inside of my life. This time I'm the painter. This time I'm the muse. I really enjoyed this collection and all of the imagery that it had. I loved the writing. It just felt like really good, solid poetry. And this is one that I would definitely purchase a finished copy for myself. After that, I have another poetry collection from NetGalley that I unfortunately did not feel very good feelings about. This one is called Good Grief by Brianna M. Pastor. Just like the title says, it explores a lot of themes of grief, trauma, depression, and it just honestly wasn't my favorite. For this one, I said, I think this collection would be great for someone who's new to poetry and wants themes that they can relate to and language that's easy to understand. For me, this collection felt very surface level, repetitive, and said a lot of things that are cliche concepts. I think that it could have been majorly edited down. With all that said, I did enjoy a handful of poems: 16, 28, 36, 44, 51, and 83. I know this is like such a mean thing to say about a poetry collection, but overall it felt like it was written by AI. It just felt very cliche and very obvious, and a lot of what I read just felt more like sentences and not poetry. And then the last book that I read in April was The Wicked King, which is the second book in the Folk of the Air series. So this one just follows the events of the first book. I said I really liked this. I think if I was being really picky, I could knock it down to a 3.5, but the vibes were there and it was a quick read, so I'm sticking with a 4 for now. I loved all of the politics and betrayal and seeing more of Jude and Carden. The ending was so surprising and I can't wait to pick up the third book. That's everything that I read in April. If you made it to the end of the video, leave a VHS tape emoji in the comments, since I read Home is Where the Bodies Are. Also, don't forget to tell me your thoughts on star reviews for nonfiction. I really would like to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you so much for watching though, and I will see you in the next one.
Appalachian sunrise.